So tell me about this series.
Yeah, so this series is called Night Drives. I didn't come up with the series name immediately, but it emerged pretty soon after, because after I started the first couple of paintings. And I call them memory paintings too, because they're not based on any particular place, although I think initially I was thinking about what it was like to drive through the Rockies when we first came out here from Ontario to move here, and a recollection of that. But at the same time, I grew up in northern Ontario, and the landscape there has some similarities to BC. It doesn't have the scale, obviously, of the mountains, and even the trees are different, but there's a feeling of wildness and remoteness there that you don't find in southern Ontario, where I went later to school. So I was remembering things like driving home from the beach on Lake Superior after a day at the beach with my parents, and the old highways that weren't, super lit, and the headlights that would light up signs and stuff as we were driving home. And so then some of these I've actually done closer, so you can take a look at the hydro lines, the old telephone and hydro lines that used to be along the old highways. And those were just little, the kinds of highways that you would find off the beaten track here in BC still. And you can see me trying to find exactly the right tone for the sky, the breaking of the cloud and the little bit of light coming up over the mountains and through the mountains, and a kind of mistiness. And you can also see me playing around and trying to figure out which direction do I want the roads to go, and would I like a road to intersect here? Do I want those wires lit, or do I want just the little things for the electricity, the little glass pieces? Do I want those lit by the headlights? So, yeah, they're a fun series. I'm not finished with them yet. I've never shown them before, and there's a kind of tension in them that I like.
You said to me your favorite part, or one of the most challenging but maybe rewarding parts, was when the lights from the two lights that came at each other.
Yes.
And it was that point of the meeting of the light.
That's right.
Said. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, because the paintings sort of suggest a story to me, and I don't know what the entire story is. There was always a bit of a danger when two vehicles would meet in the middle of the night on a remote highway, depending on the road conditions and the condition of the driver and whether they've been partying. And so maybe that's what I'm hinting at here. I don't know. I just thought about that now. But I think there was a kind of edge to that drive, as well as the beauty of seeing this silhouettes of landscapes in the distance, and quietness of the night. So, hope that in this one you can see there's a vehicle coming from the right on the main highway, and then there's this off, possibly a driveway or another smaller road intersecting, and the two vehicles are still a bit of a distance from each other, but not that far. You can tell that from the distance between the posts, and it's just a question of what's going to happen. Or is the one going to zoom by? How fast is one going versus the other? And
so this series is still evolving.
It's still evolving, yeah. Talking about it makes me want to do some more.
I want to be on that road. You were mentioning that you had all sorts of other different versions of this piece, including the actual piece of porcelain there, but pictures on your phone, things that you can refer to back and forth.
Yes,
do you think that's an advantage, having all sorts of different versions as opposed to a study of one single piece?
Well, I do, and I also think it's really important for me to be able to see my process. Previous to this digital process that records every brushstroke that I make, I wasn't really able to examine my own process. And this way I get to see myself searching, and I get comfortable with with that sense that I'm exploring constantly on this digital canvas. And that's something I was doing anyway, but I'm more aware of it now, and it's changed the way that I paint.
It seems to me like you were saying you can actually zoom in.
Yes.
And make something that is something real into more of an abstract concept.
Yes.
And by that way, you're learning how your strokes you're working, how you're actually putting something on to your canvas. That's
right. And it also helps me to remember, because the digital process is recorded, I can remember that way. Well, which digital brush was I using? I can go and pick out a particular color that I was using in this painting and save it on my palette, so that 6 months from now, if I'm not satisfied with that painting and it was never quite finished, I have an opportunity to go back and resume the work. I can review the work, and then, like you would if you were recording a song as you're a singer, and listening to yourself and saying, I like what I was doing, but I'm going to do something a little bit different now when I'm taking up this song again.
Do you think that you are learning more about yourself as an artist?
Oh,
because of that?
Yes, most definitely. Yes, and it's an interesting place to be when you're almost 70 years old, and you've been doing it for a long, long time. So I feel very fortunate to be alive right now.
I guess I can ask you, because I want your answer to be here. What was that moment where you switched into a digital medium?
Well, it was a friend coming to visit who was a techie, and she had a tablet, and she showed me a painting program that she had, a painting and drawing program, and it was a very simple program, so it was easy for somebody, a novice like me. And anyway, she showed it to me at the beginning of her visit from Ontario, and basically didn't get her tablet back until she left, and I kept making paintings on it and bringing them upstairs and entertaining, I hope, everybody upstairs. And by the time I left, she basically, it was just before Christmas, gave Carl a check and said, here's some money towards getting him a tablet, because this looks really like it's going to be fun for him.
What were you doing at the time? Like, what medium were you?
Gosh, I'm trying to remember. I think I was finishing a series about fruit. Yeah, I was doing some really large paintings. I had met an interior designer, and she asked me to do some really large single pair paintings, that some of which are now in the area in large homes. And that was a big stretch for me. So, I was kind of already trying something new for me. I had always worked in a much smaller format, and now suddenly I was working 5 feet by 6 foot canvases, and getting scared about it and exhilarated.
Oh, that's interesting that you said getting scared about it.
Oh,
so at any point during this process, knowing how fast technology is changing, are you intimidated by the fact that what you're doing now might be obsolete, or are you excited about what's to come?
Well, I've already had sort of intimations of that already, because because all software updates and apps update, and sometimes apps disappear. Software developers and app developers might have that thing up and available, and then suddenly it's not there anymore. But there's a kind of edginess to it. At the same time, I remember reading about an artist back in the 30s who's a German artist, a very renowned artist in pre-Nazi Germany, and he lost all of his life's work in a fire, and he had to start all over again as a 50-some-year-old. So, it happens that things happen to artists just like to everybody else, and you have to cope with that. I feel more and more confident that this is becoming more mainstream, and that Apple has paired up with this app developer that I use for my painting program. So I feel pretty confident that it's going to be around.
It's here to stay.
Yeah.
And then moving forward too.
Hopefully so, yes. And I have to keep learning. Every time they update my software or my app, I have to, in a sense, relearn those tools that I thought I knew. Well, I do know them, but I have to learn how to use them, or they're in different places. And making
Okay.
adjustments.
A couple questions then. Talk a little bit about the application that you actually use, just in case someone's
Yes.
interested in
Sure.
Procreate.
So this particular app is called Procreate, and it was developed about 5 years ago. And they teamed up, or at least they came under the auspices of Apple. And a couple of generations ago, of the Apple iPad Pro that I use for painting, Apple actually introduced people from Procreate to show what this painting program could do for professional fine artists. Previous to that, these kinds of programs were really about producing imagery for gamers and the gaming industry, which is still huge. And I think it's still primarily the focus, but Procreate has kind of gone into the place where fine artists are and develop tools and media that we can use that simulate very closely what our experience is with in our studio. So one of my practices is to go and watch the sunrise at the local beaches here in Parksville. I love Rathtrevor because it's really close to where I live. And I also sometimes go to the Parksville Community Beach and sit and watch the sunrise. So I also used to cycle a lot over at Rathtrevor, and I would be cycling along the pathway and looking out at low tide and seeing all these people further way out, doing all kinds of things, bringing their dogs when that was allowed, and playing volleyball and using boogie boards and all sorts of stuff. So one day I decided to take my phone with me and take some photographs to use as reference later on. And then I got into digital painting, and so that's what you're seeing here is a man playing with his lab out at the edge at low tide. And I'm studying light, how light played on his body and his clothing and the dog and the reflections in the water and so on.
So how do you decide to give the movement to the waves? All I can see right now is that this is a moving picture.
Yes.
No?
Well, I think you could see at the beginning of the painting that I was really just trying to get a feel for the waves themselves, the memory of that, and starting at the top part of the canvas and working on the color first of all, and the wave action and the sort of silkiness of the water, and then moving closer towards the shore where there's some turbulence and the tide coming in, and you can see the turbulence of the water with the white, and trying not to be too exact about it, but concentrating on the light itself and how the sunlight was hitting it. And yeah.
What would you say was the most challenging part of this particular one?
I would say the dog, actually. Yeah, the dog. Just trying to get a sense of the dogs being focused on that stick and him picking it up, and then it was fun putting the light in at the end where he's and the dog are reflected in the very shallow skimming of water that's going on there at low tide. So yeah, that would be probably the most challenging. It was fun trying to catch summer sunlight because it's very strong and different from other times of the year. And of course, there's a lot of light bouncing off the water up onto the clothing and his face, and even under his ball cap, you can see his ear lit up. So it's just an interesting way to study light and try to capture it.
Digital art. Do you have a community of digital artists that you hang around with online?
Online?
Or in the community?
Well, I use social media, and that has exposed me to other artists that are using it. And I also interact with artists who aren't using digital but like what I'm doing. So I have that contact. There are a few younger digital media people in the area that I've connected with through a meetup in Qualicum Beach. And there's a beautiful digital media center near the old train station that TELUS helped to sponsor. And through that, I've met some people. So, yeah.
You were in exhibit with us at the MAC last year. And what you showed us was hung on the wall. Now that you're going to be one of our first digital media artists in our new digital media gallery, how is the experience going to be different for you?
Well, let's see. It has its own challenges. When you're preparing paintings to go on the wall and canvases to be printed, in my case, because, the work has to go onto canvas or paper or whatever and then into a frame. That's familiar to me. This isn't, but it's exciting, and I like the idea of using screens because I'm hoping that the color matching is going to be better than it would be when we move from the screen, a device screen, to paper or canvas. We always have, the challenges of getting the right colors. That's just part of the process. But with going from screen to screen, we should have people have a better idea of what it actually looks like on my screen.
Okay, so do you start all of your portraiture with the background in red?
I don't, but I try to choose something that's going to challenge me. And in this particular case, with these danseur ones, I've been using a lot of red. And then working with that and letting that come through on sort of the background of the canvas and through the skin and all of that. Yes.
So tell me about this series.
So this series, this is part of a series that started about a year and a half ago. So this is one of those things where I've gone back and had a look. We talked about that before. And I'm looking at these portraits that I did a year ago and kind of left. I did about 20 of them, and then I decided that I was done with that for now and went on to back to landscape. And at that point, recently I thought, well, I'd like to have another look at that. So I did, and I looked at them and I liked them, but I wasn't interested in just resuming that series. So I started to just play with a portrait in this case, looking at a photograph that I'd seen. I collect stuff from the net and then just put it into an album of reference material, and I was looking at that as the beginning part of a painting. And got almost 3/4 of the way through, and as you can see right now, the image has become something quite different, because what I did was go back and take a look at the original series, grabbed one of those paintings, exported it, and copied the canvas onto another canvas, and then I'm able to import it into this new canvas I'm doing, and actually work in a kind of collage technique where I'm taking the original first portrait and superimposing it on top of the new portrait, and then creating a kind of opaque quality to it so that I can see both portraits at the same time, and I leave bits of one portrait and bits of the other. And so the original portrait series was, I think, what I would describe as pretty. It was about beauty and the beauty of youth. And the new series, which I didn't know I was going to be doing until I started painting it, and especially when I re-imported one of the original canvases, is more about the vulnerability of youth, and worldwide today. I think all youth are in a vulnerable state because of the climate change, because of the economies, the very different world that they're living in compared to the one that I grew up in 50 years ago. So I call these ones, the new series is called Bruised Portraits, because to me there's a kind of battle going on with our youth, and the feeling of people like Greta Thunberg, who just protested about the climate. This 15-year-old, imagine. But I'm feeling that batteredness, and I hope that's coming through in the portraits.
When you talk about eyes, did you have a feeling when you superimposed the second portrait on top of the first portrait that you lost that you lost something.
No.
Because eyes are the window.
That's right. Yes. No, I don't think so at all, because I think these eyes are even more penetrating. And what happens is that I take I'm able to move the canvas right around on top of it, and I can see where the original pair of eyes are. And I can actually reposition and tilt it until both eyes are aligned. And then I can erase little bits of the new canvas and have part of the old canvas showing through. So both sets of eyes are there, and that's, I think, what's giving it the depth in these portraits that the first ones didn't have. Although the first ones, I agree with you, the eyes are absolutely the most important part for me, and remain so, but it's just a different kind of layering and depth that comes through on these ones.
Are you going to use all of your Les Danseurs series and then recreate them, or are you going to pick and choose?
Well, the cool part is I can save all of them in the original states, and then I can rework every one of the first series into one of these new portraits, and I think I probably will over time. That's a good question.
Now talk to me about color. We talked a little bit about the fact that with your digital work, the colors that you choose will always remain true as long as they're shown in a digital format.
That's right. So when I first started to even become interested in art 50 years ago, I was in some museums in Europe, and I saw these wonderful old masterpieces, many of which had been restored, cleaned, restored, damaged over the centuries. And so we don't really know exactly what the original looks like in some cases. We've got a good idea, and we have wonderful professional restorers, painters in their own right who work on those old paintings. But we don't have to worry about that with the digital works, because the original is going to remain the original because it's light. And that's probably why I made the distinction when I came up with the title with you for this show. I paint with light now, is that original light is going to be just as it was. So if somebody looking at my work, if they are looking at my work, every artist's hope is that their work will survive. But in any case, somebody looking at anybody's work that's done digitally 100 or 200 years from now is going to see exactly the way that artist painted it, as opposed to a restored version of it. So that's fascinating to me.
It's fascinating.
It's a change in art, in the making of art, but art history even, over time. Yeah, so we were talking about how digital recording in the music industry has changed so much about music making.
Yes, how we do everything. Editing is different.
Yes.
You can make a voice sound like somebody else's voice.
That's right.
Yeah, you can manipulate what is the original piece, the original form, and make it into something. We talked about that.
Right.
We're changing art history.
That's right.
You are changing art history.
And we're reintroducing, so in music particular, I think about people like Nat King Cole and his daughter, Natalie, who's also gone now, but how they were able, long after her father's death, and after she was a child when her father was, an icon, and before he died rather young, and then she's in her 30s, and they find a way now to have her sing with her father. And it's just an amazing thing again. The original was amazing, but so is the fact that we have now this record of the two generations singing together.
It occurs to me that we are making history more accessible through the digital world.
Absolutely.
Because, for example, you're able to go to a piece that you did a year ago and rework it, reconfigure it, but you're also you're creating a new piece.
That's right, a new version.
That's right.
That's right. Because that's the thing. Artists change over time, just like everybody does. We all do as we age and as we mature. Our perceptions change, the way we see things change, the way we see other people changes, and so it's just speeded up even more so now. And I have an opportunity, because all of this is with me, in a device that I'm carrying around all the time. I can have a look at it. I don't have to go back in my studio and dig around, back 3 decades to look at something. And I can, and I don't do that very often, but I seem to be able to do it more often with this digital format, that I'm having a look once in a while, take a look back and say, am I done with that? I'm not sure I did that before. Kind of had these set periods of style that I was working at the time, and then I would just, sometimes, because I was working full-time as well as painting, and whatever other time I had, there were often gaps, felt like there were gaps between one body of work and the other, and now I feel that there's a continuity. It's a kind of continuous flow for me.
I was just going to say, when you revisit what you did in the past without the digital medium, do you question, well, as an artist, I guess we're always questioning what we do and the choices that we've made, but are you actually learning faster from what you did in the past because what you're doing is so much more accessible?
Yes, I think I am learning a lot more, and I'm taking many more risks than I used to take. It doesn't feel quite so scary. It still sometimes feels scary, but it doesn't feel as scary to take a big risk and just go, oh well, let's just try it and see what happens. And I don't have to erase it. I don't have to show it to anybody either. It can be on my device forever, and I never have to share that publicly with anybody else. But I might, and I might have a look at something that I did 3 years ago and say, I think there was something really good there. I think I'm going to continue that piece of work.
It seems to me that, it occurs to me that you're much more free.
Yes, and I hope that when other artists try digital, if they've been working in watercolor, oils, whatever, printmaking, and they give it a try, that they'll experience that same sense of being liberated to just dive in and try something new.
I can see, actually, if you use Procreate in addition to a canvas at the same time.
Yes.
So if you're working on a piece digitally, or you start with a canvas and then you've got a question about what you want to do and a choice that you want to make, could you not give it a test drive on Procreate and then see how it works and then
that's a very
transfer it to your canvas?
I'd never thought of that. But that's true. You could do that, and that might be a really good way for people to begin to explore Procreate. So, whatever they've achieved so far in that canvas painting, yes, absolutely, they could digitally photograph it and import it now onto a digital canvas and continue the process that way. They still have the original. Or, the other thing you can do is have many digital versions of your painting. So I do that. I will take a painting so far and then think, well, I want to try something different, but so I'll just copy this canvas and recreate it and create a new canvas. So now I've got 2 versions of it. And I may, in fact, explore that second one and decide, no, that's not what I want to do, and go back to the original again and then try another version. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool.